Today's startup offers an inclusive and unbiased stage for startup founders to shine and share their entrepreneurship and startup journeys to inspire international audiences on tech news around the world. Today's startup features Broom Standard co-founders Annamarie and Jacob. Co-founder Annamarie. She's also the CEO. So, Annamarie, can you just give a brief introduction of yourself, how you started to embark on entrepreneurship, and why you work on this startup that you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. This is so exciting to be among friends and the tech news around the world uh, ecosystem. I feel, I don't know if that makes me feel like more comfortable or more nervous actually, because, we're, as the startups and founders, we're used to presenting all the time, right? To scientific symposia or as part of maybe investor or non-diluted funding and grants that's always just like you feel polished and you know your thing, but this is such a family to me that
Yes.
just like,
This is a very relaxed setting. Just treat
okay,
it as if you are in the living room talking to a
I'm
bunch of
glad.
folks.
Yeah, I'm glad.
True.
Well, so my the reason I went on an entrepreneurial journey isn't at all by design, and I consider myself a rather unplanned founder, and certainly would have thought to be um, co-running a medical device company, but here we are, and largely all because a couple of things converged. I had this amazing career pathway in health policy and government relations around public health, and I'm a health economist by background, and so I spent a lot of time working on pediatric health, rural health, health IT issues, with everyone from state departments of health to federal agencies to um, companies, large companies like Medtronic or Boston Scientific. And I think it just was such, I felt like one of those incredibly fortunate people that actually got to do with their life what they kind of envisioned they wanted to do when they were maybe, I don't know if I was a kid and I said I wanted to do that, but like high school and college. um I was, I don't know, I just feel like very fortunate to have gone on this journey. And then about a decade ago, I had my third child, and she was diagnosed at 3 days old just prior to discharge from the hospital with critical heart defects. And those sorts of things are really like pivot moments where everything in your life that was suddenly sort of ceased to exist. And um, I think we had a medical journey that, went from the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows, right? Like our child just really barely made it through her first week of life. We actually brought our parents and our other children to the hospital to um, be prepared that she wasn't coming home. And
Mm.
when we had the good fortune to have a cardiologist that had come to Minnesota, which is where I'm located most of the time, although my company's in Hong Kong, most of my team's in Hong Kong. Um, we we kind of, I think, had all the serendipity happen where this cardiologist who had seen my daughter's condition, which was incredibly rare, happened once before about a year earlier when he was on the East Coast. And he had only been in Minnesota for 3 months. And he happened to be the cardiologist on call when they did my daughter's echo on a traveling echo machine at our community hospital where I delivered, that had come from the U of M to evaluate another baby.
Mm.
And our rounding pediatrician prior to discharge heard that there was this echo cart with an echo tech, pediatric echo tech, in our hospital evaluating this other baby, and said like, oh, you know what, I just heard there's so and so is here, let's just do a quick echo on your daughter, because they were just going to check her out for this quote unquote innocent murmur at her 1 week well baby visit. And I was totally cool with that because, third baby, if it's not, you know bleeding or a broken bone. I mean, you just don't really worry too. You feel like, I'm confident, I've got this. It's my third baby, it's all good. And you don't have any sort of panic mechanism. So I was all about just checking things out at the 1 week well baby visit. So anyway, they put her back into to see this echo tech. And an hour later, there's a cardiologist standing in my doorway telling me my daughter was in heart failure and needed to be moved immediately to the university hospital. And I remember looking at this man and telling him, like, oh no, you've got the wrong room. There's another child down the hall that had an echo too. And he's like, no, I have the right room. Because my baby looked perfectly healthy and had no signs or symptoms. I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy. I just couldn't even wrap my head around what was happening at that moment. And I'm sure Haven could appreciate as a clinician, and if there are other clinicians in the room, what's that's probably like when you like.
It must be so hard for you.
You get the deer in the headlights from a patient, like, no, you must be talking about something else, or you must be wrong, because your brain goes into this denial mode. But anyway, we were able to sort of, I started getting a little bit of a picture, but still didn't have really a proper diagnosis other than we knew that she was on heart failure. So it was already, her heart was already 3 times the size it should have been, down, pushing her internal organs down into her stomach cavity. So it was really severe. And I'm just like, how can she, like, I was just, trying to give her, feed her, and she seemed fine. How can this be? But because this amazing cardiologist kind of through that first couple of days and getting a handle on her diagnoses was able to really try some pretty unconventional things to keep her heart functioning, and get us over, I think, what was a pretty big hump there in that first week of time. She was able to be kind of medically managed on a cocktail of about 9 different medicines around the clock for the first 2 months of life. And then this is how it works with kids with congenital heart disease, which is the most common and deadly birth defect, which put her in the 1% of all babies in the world who are born with a heart defect. It kind of got her to that place where she got to grow a little bit, get a little bit stronger, but yet there was only so far you could take it before a surgery had to happen. And that is, there's sort of like this ideal window for kids that have congenital heart disease. And as a newborn, like 2-3 days old or a week old, that's not ideal. Surgeons will do it because they're skilled enough and they have no other choice. It's a life or death situation. But with my daughter, we were able to kind of, like I said, manage things and get her a little bit bigger. But then, like, you have that conversation at about 2 months, or she's got about 2 weeks left to live. So it's time. So we went by then to our 4th hospital, Boston Children's, to have the first of 2 back-to-back heart surgeries, where one of the most incredible pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons in the world, Dr. Pedro Del Nido, was able to stop her heart for almost 9 hours, fix it, and restart it. So today we celebrate Eve's birthday twice every year, or the day she was born and the day that her heart started beating again. And I don't think you truly know, and I think of myself as a person of faith, of spirituality. I am grateful to the universe every day, but you really don't know gratitude until you have something like this impact your life. And I think from there, we decided, well, of course, there's a lot of time sitting on the hospital and sleeping on the hospital floor. And, you're with your kid this whole time, right? So I did a lot of research and figured out, well, I already knew the prevalence of congenital heart disease because I served on the steering committee for Children's HeartLink at the time, which is a Minnesota-based NGO that does pediatric heart surgeries in underserved countries around the world. And I don't think I realized like anything about how they were diagnosed and, what was the journey like in the United States. And so, again, I mentioned the prevalence earlier, but what I didn't realize is that 1 out of 3 babies in our country, in the United States, were being discharged from the hospital without a diagnosis. And And that would have been my baby, right? Like, she was in very profound heart failure. So if we would have gone home, if that echo tech hadn't been there, we wouldn't have made the 1 week well child visit, right? I would have been one of the statistics. My daughter would have been one of the statistics. So then I was like, okay, I don't get, like, this seems weird. Like, why is there not a diagnostic tool? And of course, this whole time she had been on, hooked up to every sort of cord tube medication you can imagine over the journey. But the one thing that was a constant was a pulse oximeter. And I think most of us know what those are nowadays, mostly because of COVID. I think prior to that, I would mention pulse oximetry to people that weren't in the clinical space, and they were kind of like, yeah, what is that again? And it's just that little red beam of light on the finger clip that you see so often now, and just can be at your local drugstore, or if you just have a minor injury and go into your doctor, oftentimes they'll just have one of these around, and it checks the amount of oxygen in your blood. And it's been a pretty ubiquitous tool for 30 years, I'd say, maybe more. And typically it was only used in kind of triage settings or in critical care settings or in the operating room. So it's monitoring important parameters. Some doctors think of it as the fifth vital sign. And where it wasn't being used was on well-appearing individuals or well-appearing babies in this case. So there was some very early data 10 years ago coming out of Europe. So a pretty large study in Scandinavia, one in Germany, and one that was in progress in the UK. And so I just started digging and digging, and I just picked up the phone and I called the PIs on these projects, and I was like, tell me more. Where are you at? I actually got the PI of the UK project to release some of their interim data. I had to sign a bunch of my life away to get it, but I was like, this is amazing. This is really conclusive. This is concrete stuff, right? Like, if you just put a pulse oximeter on a baby's hand and foot before they leave the hospital. And, there's some variability on time of screening, a number of hours old, for instance. But if it was below a certain threshold of just kind of considered not normal, a good percentage of these kids were cardiac kids. They had some kind of condition that was causing that had cardiac root. Some of the kids would have an abnormal oxygen saturation, and they had something going on with their lungs, maybe congenital pneumonia, maybe sepsis. But at the time, that really wasn't terribly well documented because they were looking for a specific thing, and it was heart defects. And so in the United States, there hadn't been any large studies done on this. It was save one or two earlier in the 2000s, maybe 2001 and 2. There was one doctor in New York, who I'm very good friends with today, that looked at pulse oximetry in his NICU babies and found that a lot of the undiagnosed heart defects were the cause. And then another doctor in Tennessee that had done a pretty small study doing early screening. So I decided that I was going to reach out to the Eve's clinical team at the U and to our State Department of Health, which had a newborn screening team, and just say, look, here's what we're finding. Do you have any interest in doing a pilot here in Minnesota to look at feasibility and whether or not we could, get some data and see if this is something that could work here? And I fully expected them to be like, hey, thanks for that research, but good luck. But they were really willing to do this pilot study. So it became the country's first multi-hospital study. It included 6 facilities, including Mayo and Regents and several, not just in the Twin Cities metro area, but we did a couple outlying hospitals as well, because we wanted to show what that was like to identify and transport kids from smaller rural hospitals. And it was done in collaboration with the State Department of Health. And about 3 months into the study, as the newborn screening committee asked me to come and provide a little summary and update to to the team on the project, and I gladly, did that. And in fact, he was the chair at the time of the committee, the State Newborn Screening Committee, was a geneticist from Mayo Clinic, and he came up to me after I presented and said, "Hey, I know you want to finish your data collection, but now might be a good time to think about nominating congenital heart defect screening at the federal level." And I was like, "Oh,
Good.
I didn't even know." I'm like, "So there's a policy pathway. Now you're talking my language." So he happened to serve on this committee. Nominations to it needed to be made by committee members and in collaboration with outside, teams, either advocates and researchers, combination thereof. So within 3 months, we had a nomination packet together, and January of that next year. So, Eve wasn't just a year old. I flew to DC and testified in support of this nomination. It moved into full evidence review with the Federal Advisory Committee that advises the Secretary of Health and Human Services in the United States on all the conditions that babies should be screened for. And within a year of that, it was added to the Federal Uniform Screening Panel. So we have just now the 10th anniversary a few weeks ago of universal newborn heart screening in the United States. So every baby now in the US, about 40 million so far, have been screened for heart problems before they leave the hospital, thanks to Eve's journey.
Oh, that's great news. So tell us a bit more about Bloom Standard now. I heard you also mentioned that you have a team in Hong Kong who is also working on the research, right? So how do you example your team for this, and what is the status now for this project?
Yeah, sure. I think Jake's in the audience, so if you want to pull him up whenever you
Oh, sure.
think about it. He's in
Raise
the
a
second
hand,
row there.
please.
Jake, if you're listening, hit the
Oh, with the
hand
party
raise.
hat? Oh, I got
Oh,
him.
yeah, he's there. He's got the party hat. He's a newbie. I had to recruit.
Yeah.
Hi, Jake.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome
Good.
on stage.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where we went from the story I just told you was newborn. I started a foundation, an NGO in the United States and internationally that started working on implementing earlier diagnostic and referral pathways for babies. So this newborn screening piece was really important just because US babies were getting it. Most of the babies in the rest of the world weren't. And so it took well, we're still doing it, obviously. Newborn Foundation still exists, and I'm still the co-founder and leading that effort. And now we work in 12 countries internationally. But one of the things we identified early on, both in the United States and overseas, was the lack of access to follow-up imaging for the babies that were flagged with a pulse oximeter. So I almost can think of pulse oximetry as like a pre-screen. It's one of those things that gives us some information, like a baby is hypoxemic, basically. So there's something wrong, but we don't know what's wrong. So you have to suss out that next step. And so from there, oftentimes in the United States, babies will have to be medically transported to another hospital to be able to get this ultrasound of the heart, which is called an echo or echocardiography. And we can do it because we can afford it in this country, but it's pretty clunky and it's expensive, and it's sometimes anxiety for the parents to do that. And additionally, if we do confirm they have heart disease at maybe a mid-tier hospital, oftentimes they'll have to be packaged up again and then sent to the tertiary center, the place that has actually a heart surgeon and a pediatric cardiologist on staff. And so my daughter, the 2 times she almost died, were in medical transport. And so I have some baggage around this issue. And for as much as we saw that happening in the United States, internationally, you can do like easily, 10x or 20x. No babies have access to this kind of imaging. Fewer than 5% of babies have access, and children have access to pediatric ultrasound. And so that really became the roots of Bloom Standard, or Newborn Foundation started kind of identifying it as an unmet need and kind of looking within we had a little innovation incubator within our nonprofit that would figure out who we could team up with in the technology ecosystem that could address some of these problems. So for instance, for pulse oximetry, those bedside oximeters are still pretty expensive So being able to deploy those at scale in rural China or the Philippines or Pakistan was difficult. And so when I
Accessibility, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I approached the company, which makes kind of the gold standard, especially for pediatric sensors devices. I said, listen, it, it's amazing tech, and well, you guys or our medical world and developed world thinks this is a pretty ubiquitous and for relatively low cost test, low cost sensor. In the rest of the world, it's still too costly. Could you take your hardware and maybe modify that into software, make something that's like a mobile phone application? So we could still deploy this, but at maybe, 1/5, 1/10 the cost. And they were able to do that. And Newborn Foundation was the first, I had the very, very first prototype of the world's first mobile phone pulse oximeter. And that's what we use in almost all of our project sites around the world where the Newborn Foundation works. But for ultrasound, it was harder because these companies that do ultrasound have a very, very fixed model and a very, very fixed sort of set of equipment that are used, particularly in high resource settings. So once we kind of had to get our head around what the barriers to entry were for ultrasound. Why 5% of, only 5% of children have access? And once we kind of identified it wasn't just the super expensive equipment and the super bulky, you think of those, if you go in and have an ultrasound or an echo, that's a big piece of equipment on a cart, and it's, it takes a lot, to shuffle that around, right? So it wasn't just the cost and the size of the equipment. It was the fact that you needed someone that was really trained to be able to not just interpret those images, but to get them in the first place. Someone is steering that wand on the patient's body, whether that's the belly of a pregnant woman or the chest of an adult or a pediatric cardiac patient, or most recently to acquire images of the lungs. So we did do some work with some industry folks early on, trying to figure out what could be the way to not just do assisted interpretation, be that by telemedicine or maybe early machine learning algorithms. How do we make it easier for the person to acquire the images? How could someone at the front line of care that maybe works at the hospitals that the babies are being born at, or works at a primary health center, how could they do it? And it was just a plotting, like we were just having trouble. We couldn't figure out a way to move the ball along with any of the industry tech as it existed. And granted, we're a small NGO, small player, we don't have a huge team. We can't boil the ocean, but we tried really hard and decided about 2015-16 to get a first grant from the University of Minnesota to just do a proof of concept around whether or not we could, with the right set of kind of out of the box thinking engineers, make an ultrasound machine that would drive itself. So you wouldn't need someone to manage that probe. And that's really when we realized that it was technically feasible to do this, not easy, but technically feasible. That's when we spun out a social impact company in Minnesota out of the Newborn Foundation's Innovation Incubator. And from there, pursued sort of some additional research, building a small team, started our actual Hong Kong limited company in 2019, and then a Delaware C Corp in 2020. So we've grown now to 7 on our team, and then a clinical and technical scientific advisory team of about 20, all of whom are actively engaged, and I almost consider them like part of. They're really, really people we reach out to on a everyday basis to move us along.
That's nice. Okay, since we have Jacob with us now on stage, you want him to give a little brief introduction and also what is his role in this Bloom standard? Hi, Jake.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Sure.
Yeah, go
Absolutely.
ahead, Jake.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, I feel kind of like Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit. This is a very unexpected journey for me to be on. I never intended to be an entrepreneur and never expected myself to be so heavily involved in international business. I met Annamarie about 5 years ago, working with her foundation through a company called Owlet Baby Care that was one of the founders of. And I only founded that company, kind of like Annamarie, felt just, impressed and driven towards doing something to help others. I was doing research at the university for cancer research and for pharmaceutical research. And my professor introduced us to this group and said, hey, there's a year-long fellowship to learn entrepreneurship and innovation. And I had no interest in doing that. I felt very comfortable just staying in a lab, kind of keeping my head down. And kind of last minute felt, well, if this could help him to run a successful lab, to have some of these business skills, then maybe there's something that could help me. And that was really a pivotal thing that took me on a very different pathway and very different journey. I met the rest of the founders, or who had become the founders from Owlet Baby Care, and we started that company out of the university, which grew to be kind of the number one infant monitor for consumer side in the U.S. and in the world. It's using pulse oximetry as well, very much like Annamarie's newborn foundation, but is a simple little sock that monitors the baby's heart rate and oxygen levels, and then notifies the parents to check on their baby when there's a significant change. And through that process, with our youngest, when he was born, actually came full circle and helped notify us to check on him, and we feel helped save his life when about as a 1-year-old he had stopped breathing during the night, and it notified us to go check on him. And so very grateful for the unexpected journey to come into entrepreneurship and help develop technology like that. I spent most of my time in the field, actually with moms and dads and their babies testing. I don't think I went into the office for about a year and a half at one point, and it was extremely insightful to spend that much time just hands-on looking at a problem and trying to figure out what is the job to be done and how can we actually solve the unmet need that parents can't even put their finger on, and identify solutions for problems that they don't recognize. And taking that experience towards probably the 6th or 7th year at Owlet, we started working with foundations that would reach out to us. A lot of these were parents who had lost a child to SIDS, or who had health conditions, or like in Annamarie's case, had done an amazing job just doing health advocacy. And we put together kind of a team of these different groups and started looking at how can we not only innovate within the technology space, but how can we also innovate within the space for reaching out and addressing unmet needs and actually getting product into parents' hands in unconventional ways. And through that process, met Annamarie, started working with her, and then spent the last few years at Owlet focusing on international and kind of as a one-man team in the company of about 150, launched Owlet throughout several different regions in the world, throughout Australia and Canada, and then through Europe. And geared up to start working in Asia as well. And that's about when the company grew quite a bit and got, it was not a startup anymore. And that's where I had grown comfortable to work in, and really felt just driven towards finding solutions for the kids that I was meeting throughout the world in some of these low and middle income countries. And as a consumer device that was being driven by quite a bit of investment, that was not our direct market entry, and so that was something that would have to be in the future. And so looking at Annamarie and what she was doing, just felt very passionate about being able to jump in and help bring something that really addressed frontline healthcare needs, especially for these kids.
That's great. So Annamarie and Jake, so what? How is it going now for Blue Room Standard? What is the status now? Do you have any challenge that you're facing now, or is everything going on well?
It's going very well, but like all startups, there's always challenges. The first and foremost was leaving an established company and starting a new company with Annamarie right at the kind of onset of COVID, and then having that be a worldwide company where we were both supposed to spend a significant amount of time over in Hong Kong. It really, we very quickly had to adapt to having everyone be remote in the company. So that's all of our development being remote, all of our testing, all of our, everything. So that was an interesting challenge. But going from there, it's just been how fast can we grow and how fast can we bring team members in. And so we've followed kind of the route that Annamarie has used in the past, which I think has been very successful in bringing in non-diluted funding. And we're in the process, like all small startups, of fundraising, as that's also very key to be able to grow. But for team members, this is where I've been very impressed, is just through the relationships Annamarie has been able to make over the last decade of working with different clinicians and groups around the world. I've never seen such an outpouring of individuals being willing and able to really just add to and help build something. So we have dozens of hospitals and clinics around the world that are just standing by and waiting to help with clinical trials, or have offered up data and resources, multiple study sites. And then really, like she mentioned, the group of dedicated advisors has been very impressive to me, to see some of these individuals who are considered really the tops of their fields, just willing to add anything they can at any point to promote this solution and bring things forward. But as far as the technology, we've been able to grow quite a bit and improve over early prototypes. And so at the moment we're still in an MVP type stage and doing a lot of iteration, and gearing up to start doing some clinical trials and field studies towards the end of the year.
Annamarie, you want to add on to that?
Oh yeah, no, that was great, Jake. And I just when he says he's impressed by sort of the team, both our internal staff and our advisors, I can tell you this would not be happening if not for Jake's leadership as the part of our executive and founding team. I mean, he's really not just
teamwork,
not just skilled, having gone through what he went through at Allen, building a unicorn company, but in the consumer medical space. But he's just a fine human being, and I think fine human beings attract other fine human beings.
That's right.
I feel just very grateful. I know I've said this to him before, personally and in front of the team, but this group should hear it too. He's just a really, really good person, and I'm very fortunate to count him as a friend and a partner. So that was a good recap. I mean, I think what's been really exciting over the last month, and sometimes when you're in startup mode, and I know Chris on stage can very much appreciate this, and he's probably on his business call right now, popping back and forth, but you don't really take very much time to appreciate the good days and the wins, because you just kind of have to dive right back into the next crisis, the next problem to solve, the next deadline you need to meet. But September, the last month or so, including just rolling into the first of this month, has been a really, really exciting time for us. Our technology was included in the World Health Organization's compendium of innovative health technologies. And that's a compendium that's released every couple of years, that focuses on devices and technologies that can be used in resource poor settings specifically. And in this case, this edition of the compendium was focused on responses to COVID-19. And you can imagine they got a lot of technologies sent their way, a lot of submissions and applications to be included in the compendium, because it is that resource that global health funders use and governments use to determine what they should purchase for their country or their region. And it's a quite thorough. The submission itself is a heavy lift, but the review process is rigorous, and so they have both commercialized products in that catalog, in the compendium, and then prototype stage technologies that are moving into commercialization phase. And so that's where we are. I think I want to say 9 of the 24, I think, were our prototype stage, but only 24 were included in the compendium. So that has been really exciting. Or actually, I've submitted now our progress since the original submission in the winter of last year to the second edition of the COVID-19 compendium, which will come out next year from the WHO. And then we won the rare disease competition for pediatric startup technology from Children's National, which is has an FDA affiliated pediatric device accelerator network, and that just happened last month as well. And that comes with an automatic clinical trial site at Children's National, which is important for the very reason I just mentioned, because it's has a direct pipeline to FDA to help for your device to get through regulatory in a more streamlined fashion. So those sorts of relationships are really, really critical. We're not lacking for clinical trial partners or sites. We're very fortunate in that regard. But this one is really exciting for us to have another U.S.-based site in addition to our international sites, and get that data packaged up in a way that's useful for our 510K submission. And that's important, right? For anybody that's in the medical device space. Like, one of the greatest challenges you will have isn't just having a smart team of engineers and building a great product and even having a great commercialization team. One of your greatest challenges is being totally engrossed in and at the front end of your regulatory process, because you don't just, FDA isn't the only thing you're going to need, right? But FDA is a pretty critical piece to even be able to consider submission in some of the other jurisdictions. And of course, our device for automating ultrasound would not just be used in low resource settings. That's our primary entry point because we feel like it's the greatest unmet need, but it's useful in high resource settings as well.
Great. Okay, Annamarie and Jacob, are you ready for audience Q&A? Great. Okay. Friends on stage, if you have a question, please flash a mic or send me a DM, those in the audience as well. I will bring you up slowly. So anyone have the first question for Annamarie or Jacob? Please go ahead. Heyman, you have a question?
No, actually, I'm quite intrigued. And Annamarie, well, disclosure-wise, we've known each other, I guess, on Tech News for a while. But I'm curious with the autonomous part, with the ultrasound, because I'm using ultrasound for MSK, musculoskeletal for the audience. But for babies and so forth, like how much resource intensive is this process? Or do they need external devices, especially in the low and middle income countries? Do they need a specialty device to receive it, or is it everything in an app?
Yeah. So thanks for asking, Heyman, because it is pretty technical. If this were an easy thing to solve, it would have been solved already. Trust me when I tell you that, because there are a lot of ultrasound imaging players that know this space really well. So our device is both hardware and software. So we've and one sort of feeds the other a little bit, right? Like in sort of determining how we could do a stationary based device that think of it as almost like a wearable, Heyman. It's like a wrap or a vest that goes on the patient. And so you only need enough skill to know how to place the wrap or the vest on the patient and press a start button. And because of the sensor configuration, it's able to image at all the appropriate angles and do the image stitching on the software side, combined with the machine learning algorithms to identify kind of key indicators for cardiac presentations, structure, flow, enlargement. Those we've got like kind of a list of the key things that our device is meant to see, tell us if something is normal versus abnormal. And same for the lungs. So AB lines, consolidation, the things that we'd be looking for to identify pneumonia, which type of pneumonia, or if it's a COVID related lung presentation. And so all of that happening, all of that processing is happening right in real time on board. We do have a cloud-based infrastructure that allows us to capture and transmit data when we need to. But what we really want to do is give that frontline user an answer right then and there so they know how to refer appropriately.
I know it's.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Go ahead, Hannah.
No, it'll make a great. If that's
Okay.
the case, it's sounds amazing, and looking forward to more.
Yeah, thanks, Heyman. It would be pretty disruptive in the space for sure, and certainly has applications beyond pediatrics. If you can imagine, all the adult cardiac applications or the obstetric OBGYN applications, even list line placement and things like that. But for now, we're taking well, the problem that we were aiming to solve first, and I think scaling from there is not too difficult. But tiny hearts and tiny lungs are hard, and so we really felt compelled to fix this problem first, I guess.
Okay, great. Thank you. Rachel, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, Annamarie, for the amazing story. Annamarie, does this device qualify for diagnostics? It's a wearable, right? And the reason I'm asking is that there is a WHO essential diagnostics list.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking whether that will qualify for that list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually would. WHO put out, in fact, I was one of the advisors on the writing group for early technical specifications for pulse oximetry and for portable ultrasound. And then their technical specifications were updated for portable ultrasound in the very end part of last year. I wanted to say November, so it'd be a year ago now, I guess. And our any sort of diagnostic ultrasound technology that can be used in the way that I've described to you would be part of that and would be included as something on the essential medicines list. So obviously that's important to us. It's important for all ultrasound companies that are doing imaging, especially for pediatric imaging. And I think by default, once we have received regulatory approvals and can be appropriately marketed as a Class 2 device, we would just fall into the same category as any others. It's just that we have the capacity to be autonomous on the imaging acquisition side, which is what makes us unique.
I see. And you are doing clinical trials globally. You plan to file globally, or first in US, then EMEA, kind of the usual route?
Mm-hmm. Kind of, it's a little bit of a tandem strategy. I mean, FDA is obviously, as I mentioned, important because some of the other countries won't accept your application until you've got your FDA clearance. But that said, we plan to file actually in Hong Kong itself as soon as we're ready. We're just having some of those very first kind of initial meetings with regulatory bodies and some of the other parts of the world where we sort of, as part of our regulatory strategy, we want to approach. CE mark is an important one as well, because there are some of our target entry countries in LMICs, low and middle income countries, that will accept CE mark as the regulatory clearance to distribute. Mainland China is actually an important market for us, so that one is not without its complexities, but I think we wouldn't want to sort of embark on that road until we're at least close with FDA to feel like we're getting through maybe some of our submission hurdles there before we start approaching the mainland China regulators. I don't know if that helps, if that answered, Rachel.
Yes, yes, it does. Cheryl, is it okay I ask one last question?
Sure, go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. Annamarie, have you heard about this EU M for All? Essentially, European Union has a pathway towards kind of a review approved drugs, for example, in US, and provide the regulatory kind of process for the low and middle income countries. So I'm just thinking, once you receive FDA clearance, maybe what you could do is leverage this European Union's initiative to get access to the low middle income country. Just one thought, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. I've heard of it, but I won't pretend to be an expert on it. And Jacob, I think you've done a little bit of digging on the EU pathway for low and middle income countries as well. So I appreciate that very much. And I can promise you we'll be diving deep into all of the appropriate pathways to make sure that we found the cleanest way to safely reach all the patients in the most resource poor settings in the fastest possible way. Because what pains me right now is that every single day our device is needed right now, particularly because of COVID, but not just because of COVID. And I know my team knows this about me. I've got sort of the patience of a gnat when it comes to getting this stuff done. But I'm also a stickler for, the rules and the regulations and IRBs and ethics approvals and making sure we do everything the way it needs to be done. And again, I think if we didn't have this amazing team of clinical partners in different parts of the world that could help us accelerate our clinical trials and get us data with the least number of hurdles possible, I think we'd be mired, in CRO world and just it's so hard. It's so hard, and it pains me because there's so many great innovators out there in this world, and the hurdles of being able to do these trials and get through the regulatory process. It just sometimes it's there for a reason, for safety and efficacy, and we get all of that, but it sometimes keeps amazing things from the people who need them most. So I hope we can be a great case example of success soon for other developers of technologies like this.
We hope so too, Annamarie. You're doing a good thing. I think, yeah, definitely there'll be good results. Anyone on stage want to ask a question? Please just go ahead. If not, I will ask one. So just now I heard Jacob mention about the non-dilutive funding. Are you still fundraising now, or have you already so-called temporary have the amount of funds for a good runway for you to develop your product?
No, we're still we're still fundraising at the moment. Yes, that's correct.
So what kind of activities have you been involved in doing that? I think you have to speak closer to the mic. You're a bit far.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me a little better?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh.
Jake, maybe you can just explain what's our current, like the slide in the deck that's like, here's where we're at and here's where we're wanting to go, and that's the use of proceeds.
Yeah, why not?
One.
Sure. No, that's great. Yeah, so at the moment we have, it's probably getting closer to about $1 million in non-dilutive funding that we've had promised to the company. Some of that is for very specific use as partners in the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, for example. That funding comes in a reimbursive format, to where as we spend against R&D every 6 months, they reimburse a portion of that. So as far as growing the team, though, for that funding, we're currently looking to raise about 750,000 US dollars, which will be used over the next 18 months, especially in growing the team, adding in some key hires that we're currently using consultants for to bring that expertise in-house as we see the need there, especially around the AI side and the ML side. And then separate from that, still pursuing some additional non-dilutive funding routes, and then looking at doing a proper seed round of probably around 4 million in about 18 months to 2 years out from now.
Mm-hmm. So you are targeting most of your activities in US for the fundraising, or are you also reaching out to other parts of the world?
We have been reaching out to other parts of the world. My experience has been primarily with fundraising in the US, just through an outlet, but working with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park especially, they've been able to connect us with a number of resources over in Hong Kong and through China that are potential fundraising partners. And so we've been, actually only more recently, been starting to pitch to different groups over in Hong Kong, Singapore, and China, and then a number of groups that we're familiar with in the US as well, many of which are more global oriented.
Yeah, some social impact stuff too, Cheryl, that are more, based out of Europe, for instance, that are very tied into WHO, World Bank, Global Fund. Those are good. So a lot of them have some very interesting impact funds right now, and have reached out to us, which has been really nice. So having kind of early conversations there, and it's exciting. I'm so glad to be learning from Jake through this journey, because I've only done fundraising on the NGO side prior to this. So there was a lot to learn, about approaching, angel investors and seed investors and VCs.
Yeah, just learn on the job.
Yeah, for all of us constantly, because it's a very new twist as well. I'm used to working in consumer devices, and so working in something that's regulated, there are very different views from investors across the board on that, and they want to see different progress and different milestones than you would have in just a consumer electronics device. And so it's been a good learning experience every day.
So the product is on MVP stage now, and how long more do you think that you will be able to launch it?
Well, go ahead, Jake. I mean, we have to go through our trials phase right now. We've been doing imaging validation trials for a little over, I guess, going back over a year, and now having the actual, being able to pull data off of the actual device and the sensors is kind of this next phase of trials that have cleared through ethics boards and IRBs internationally. So our starting sites are in, besides our US-based sites, we have one in the Philippines, one in Mongolia, mainland China, Hong Kong, and then phase 2, Pakistan, Kerala, India, and Bolivia. So there's going to be a lot of data coming in concurrently, some of it focused on point-of-care lung ultrasound, and some of it focused on the cardiac presentations. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very busy, next few months. I don't think I answered your question, Cheryl, because I started going into the trial sites.
No worries.
I'm so excited about my trial sites that it's really. You asked me about commercialization
to reach the launch.
Right, to reach the launch, right. So obviously anything with actual commercialization launch, people can buy the product is incumbent on our regulatory clearance. So the good news is everything we're doing now and everything we've done previously with any sort of research or data collection is packaged up as part of our submission. And FDA from here starts guiding us on what holes we need to fill for them to be able to move us through to clearance. So in a amazingly perfect world, 18 months. So you never know, though. I mean, if we, because we've got a lot of predicate device pieces that we can lean on for our technology. So if FDA, I mean, obviously, all of the regulatory agencies are looking for tools that can address COVID-19 response, right? If they feel like we have cleared their hurdles and can even expedite us from there, then wonderful, right? But we have to make sure that the device we put into the field, and like any good medical device company, any good device company, you're constantly trying to optimize and improve, right? Every piece of information gives you a way to make it better, easier, safer for those who are using your technology. So for us, that's really where it's at. We will move as fast as the regulatory process lets us, and that allows then for us to, our focus is split between direct to health systems and providers and governments. And governments is where I'm strong. That's where my background is. That's where I feel like I have the best relationships, is working with ministries of health on tenders and procurement.
That's great. Okay. Anyone have any question to us before we are about to wrap? Okay, if not, Annamarie or Jacob, do you have any last part to drop?
Well, I have one thing to drop, because I see down below in speakers is a guy named Paul, who happens to be same last name as me and who happens to live in the same house as me. So he's I just wanted to acknowledge.
I've just invited him.
Yeah, well, he doesn't. I'm not sure he wants to speak this morning or not, but I just want to acknowledge, that look, we're in this unique situation. He's the guy who went through all of the journey that I laid out in the first 15 minutes of this chat with me. He's the father of my children, including the driver of Eve's. What I think is her legacy is to help other children that have broken hearts, and I am so grateful that he not only supports this crazy journey that I've been on as a professional and as a mom, but he's part of it. And not all husbands and wives can work together effectively, and we just feel incredibly blessed to be in this household where we can. And he's got an amazing background, like helped run the startup garage within United Health Group for several years. So he's the kind of guy you would look to be an advisor to your company. So to have him as someone that's on the founding team and actively engaged in the development of this technology has been a real gift. So I wanted to acknowledge him and thank him.
Your supportive partner. Hi, Paul. We heard your voice once on Tech News Around the World. Finally, we saw your own avatar. Do you have? Can you share some of your thoughts about Annamarie or her startup, or the journey you and her have gone through, especially when your baby just came about and have those challenge that Annamarie has mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and want to make sure everybody can hear me just fine. But what in this whole process, and having kind of developed multiple technology startups throughout my career, is that we have a fantastic team. This is probably one of the strongest teams I've been a part of in a long time, maybe ever. But one of the things that I continue to remind her and the team is, be married to the problem, not the solution. As we go through, and we had ideas of what we wanted to build, and it happens to be that much of the stuff that we had in our heads has kind of happened to work out for what we want to do, with some changes, but really is being focused on the problem at hand and working that. uh, and if you're married to the problem, it means that the solution will always present itself in the best way you possibly can to save the most amount of lives. And really, that's really been a big part of this in for all the experiences I've had professionally, that driving factor for us, and really just the framework and the basis for our reason to be is so strong. It's kind of driven us and so well in the last year, and all through all the hard things that we've gone through. So I just wanted to add that, and thanks everybody for listening to our story.
Thank you, Paul. Annamarie.
Oh,
So
he's
sweet.
so right and so good. Well, I see, and you don't have to pull her up because I know this room needs to close out soon.
Oh no, we have another 15 minutes if
Do
you
we?
want to continue.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, one of our amazing biomedical engineers from our team in Hong Kong is down below, Jemima. So hey, Jemima, I'm waving at you. And
Yeah.
then I see
Can you raise his hand, please?
Oh, she wants to. Jemima, you kind of, it's
Jemima,
9:30
I
in Hong Kong.
got her.
And then there's an incredible human being and a great angel investor. I know he's very active on Clubhouse and helping mentor and advise kind of early stage startups. But John Park, the little smiley face down there, I'm sure he just wants to hang out in the section below. But I'm Clubhouse is an amazing place if you are in the startup ecosystem, and I've been very grateful to meet him and get to know him, and he's been just a cheerleader and a supporter of our work for many months now. And anyway, it's good to see you, John. So I just had to give you a shout out for all
The
you do here.
smiling angel.
I
Hi, John.
thank you for the kind words. Thanks for having me up on stage, Cheryl. And it's true. I'm a big. We met maybe several months ago, and she's an amazing founder. And her team. I don't know. I missed the first half with Jake, and I don't know if she went over her team, but her team is fantastic as well. Which, as an investor side, it's a big differential.
That's great. Oh, we have Jemima on stage too.
Hi, Jemima.
Hi everyone.
Thanks for joining from Hong Kong.
Absolutely, no problem.
So we have you before we go to bed. So did Jake get you what you needed for your application to finish that application?
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Good. We'll just circumvent this meeting, this room for our own personal company business. Anyway, Jemima's awesome. She's part of the original group of hires that Bloom Standard made in Hong Kong. We're so grateful to have her. She actually stepped up to the plate and did a super kind of I don't know. I didn't want to freak her out and say it was high pressure, but she had to do a presentation in front of the Every Breath Counts Coalition about a month ago, which is one of the leading multi-stakeholder organizations working on COVID-19 right now, focused on access to oxygen and diagnostics for COVID-19. And every important player in the world was listening on that call. And by important players, I mean the ones I mentioned earlier. World Health Organization is on that call. World Bank, Global Fund, USAID, and then a lot of industry partners, right? Philips, Medtronic, the Vaccine Coalition. So anyway, Jemima, thanks for all you do. We're glad to have you and building amazing tech with you.
Thank you all. So, Jacob, you have any last words before we wrap?
Yeah, no, thank you for having us on here. In my experience, it's been that there are usually, even if they don't stay long term with the company or if they just touch the product for a little while, hundreds of people that get involved and make an impact and having a successful entrepreneurial journey and bringing something meaningful to the market. And this really is a worldwide problem and a big problem that we're looking to solve. And so if anyone listening has the inclination, please reach out. We'd love to talk with you and get your thoughts and your feedback on what we're doing, because I know it always takes more to make something like this successful. So thank you.
Thank you. So with that, thank you everyone on stage and in the audience for spending this 1 hour plus with us and listen to Annamarie and her co-founders and her partner regarding Bloom Standard. If you are a founder, or if you have good founders around you who need a stage to 1 hour stage to self-promote, to share about their startup, to drop plugs on, getting more traction, fundraising or hiring, just reach out to me and I'll try my best to schedule a session for them. Okay, so with that, if there's no one on stage who wants to say something, I will be closing the room in 5, 4,
Thank you, Cheryl.
3, welcome, 2,
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Annamarie.
1.